Okay, welcome back. So, if you have been watching, you will see that I have uploaded a few videos about setting up what you're currently looking at right now, which is effectively our Typescale for the desktop. Okay. Since I've actually uploaded that video, remember we set up what we had was the spec regular, right? And initially, if you remember my first or second video in this course, I mentioned that we're going to use this to create effectively what would be spec notes, right? To kind of like, label certain elements of a page and effectively, just point to things that you would never see, you wouldn't otherwise, you would actually have to explain to a developer or another member of a team. Well, I also mentioned that I'm going to create a component. I'm going to show you guys that I can use this. Well, since then, and maybe I'm late to the party. I don't think I am, but Figma have just recently released annotations. Now, that is literally a godsend because then it will literally we don't need to create that component anymore. And this type style that I have for spec can literally only be used for what we're using it for now, which is basically to outline, what type of component, just to describe the component. And yeah, there's an argument that says, yeah, why don't you just use annotations to effectively describe, what we're looking at on the page? Well, the fact of the matter is we can, but looking at the current version of annotations, I can't really lay them out like this in a nice, neat way. So, do you know what, let's give a quick test run. So you get annotation by coming up to the comment button, or you can use the shortcut by pressing Y on your keyboard. And what that does is you can literally hover over whatever you want to annotate. So let's say, for example, we want to annotate over this particular component right here, right? Or this particular layout because it goes really granular into the layers. So if I clicked on this, for example, and I'd say, you can create categories as well. So that can be, design, content, accessibility, whatever you want. You can even edit and add your own categories as well. Let's just say for the meantime, I'm just going to, for argument's sake, I'm going to call it interactions, right? Now I'm going to say, this is the spacing, right? I'm just typing rubbish. It doesn't make any particular sense whatsoever, okay? Um, and then what's cool about this as well, that you can add certain properties attached to this. So I can say, okay, this is, you know, um, line height or font size or whatever, or, is this particular color attached to it if you really want to get granular with that. So let's just say I select, for argument's sake again, I just select fill, right? Once you're done, this is what happens to the annotation, right? It just hovers outside of the actual frame itself. So even though, yes, it's very useful and it's beautiful and it links directly to what you want to link it to, um, we actually can't use it to lay out the way we're doing it because it's literally going to be plastered all over and all around the frame. So it's nice, and we will actually use this when we get into actually designing and laying things out because I think it'll be super useful. And I really, really thank you, Figma, for listening to us designers and bringing this out because we really need things like this. I'm going to turn it off. How do you turn it off? See, I need to learn this. I need to learn this myself. Hide annotation. Oh, Shift Y. Okay, cool. See, we're all learning together. But yeah, even though we can't lay it out the way we're laying out now, but we'll use it for things when it comes to actually laying things out, right? Maybe when we create an actual actual components, we might point some things out. So yeah, back to Typescale now. So we've laid out Typescale for the desktop, okay? And now what I told you I was going to show you, again, if you need to watch that video, I literally posted a detailed design with me video, or literally how I laid all this out, and it's like hours long. So if you want to follow along, by all means, it's like 4 or 5 parts. Jump on that, and by the end of it you should have something that looks like this, okay, or your own version of this. But this is literally what we're working towards. Now we're going to now create a mobile and a tablet Typescale. Now, one of the first questions I'm always asked is, "Oh, Michael, How do I know what screen size to design for? I'm gonna just let you in on a secret. That's actually not a secret. Um, don't overthink it. Literally, don't overthink it. Literally, go into Figma's frame and pick any one of these devices and stick to it. Ideally, and this is what I do. And like the reason why, okay, first of all, the reason why I say you should potentially just go in and just select any one of these, because you're going to design it to fit that area of space you're working with anyway, right? So your type scale will fit that. And obviously, because Figma is working and literally on the times one size, when you calculate that into retina size, then it's going to be like 3 times its size, and it's going to be super sharp and all that good stuff. But realistically speaking, just like we just done on the desktop, you just need to make it fit, right? Now, if you really want to get a bit more detailed with it, what I would recommend you do is use whatever device that you have, right? I have an iPhone 14 Pro. I use that. So my bad. Right here. So this is what I select. I just, bring that onto the canvas and I do that. And then I use the Figma app on my phone to literally optimize that. So I'm literally looking real time on my actual device on how this font size are going to look, right? Now, don't kill yourself by thinking you need to optimize for every phone size and every device out there. You will kill yourself. It's not that deep, because when it goes into development, they will make it responsive, just like you're making it responsive, and it's going to fit whatever frame it is. If it doesn't look good on some phones, nah, it is what it is, man. You know what I mean? Um, but generally, what we're working on, it should fit generally on most devices. Okay, same thing with iPad as well. I have an iPad Pro. Is like one of the first generation iPad Pros. I've got like a 10.5 one. Um, it's not any of these. It's not any of these ones here, because these have different resolutions. But I just literally go to archive and I'll literally pick iPad Mini, because that's the resolution that's going to fit on what I can preview. So as long as you fit your frame to what you can preview it on, you should be pretty much fine. And I think if you design your designs and create your components and create your type scale to fit the devices you're on, considering you're designing in a in a responsive format, you should be pretty much okay. It should pretty much look fine on most devices. The only time you need to be device specific is if you're making an app for a specific device. I think that goes without saying. So if you're targeting a certain phone because your experience is for that particular phone, then by all means design for that particular phone or particular tablet. Years ago, I did a project for Ford, and they were creating a in-house UI experience, or UX experience, should I say, or whatever experience. They were creating some interactive experience, but everything was to fit on 1920 by 1080p screens. So everything that was being designed for that project was literally in that screen format itself. Okay, so those are specific cases where you kind of have to stick to a certain screen size, because you're developing an app or a specific experience, or you're designing for a watch, or you're designing for VR goggles, or you're designing for a car dashboard, or you're designing for your fridge, or whatever you're doing. If there's specific sizes involved, use the specific sizes. If you're designing for a responsive format, pick a device, ideally the one you have that you can actually preview your stuff on, and run with it. Don't worry too much about it. I hope that helps. Yeah? Cool. All right. So first things first is we are going to design our type scale for iPad. Before we get into that, one thing we need to do is we need to set up the variables. So when we're using our type scale on different breakpoints, it will literally automatically fix itself. Yeah? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the variables panel, our good old variables panel, and we are now going to set up what I call we're going to set up our sizing tokens. Now, this is where we're going to introduce modes, and we're going to start building things for desktop, mobile, and you guessed it, tablet. Okay, so we already kind of started that using the mode here in our typography tokens, and we started off by using the desktop mode. Now, just before we get into developing the tablet and the mobile modes, I'm going to literally develop a new collection. going to go to the create new collection. I'm going to call this prims / breaks and grids. Now, why am I calling it breaks and grids? Breaks and grids is symbolizing breakpoints and grids. We're going to use this to create actual numerical values to represent our breakpoints, i.e. the different screen sizes, and when to tell our system when to kick in with the tablet sizes and the mobile sizes, and also to set up for our grids. So we're going to set up grids at some point, to ensure that our content sits in particular places on our screens. Okay. Also, in addition to that, as we go on in this process, I like to use these things called spacers. Now, I'll explain spacers to you when time comes. But these are kind of just like placeholder shapes to kind of let you know that content is going to fit here. So I kind of put like a little gray box or a red box or whatever box spacers. These, what we're going to put in the particular in this part of our variable system, is literally going to accommodate for that in the future. So first things first is we're going to create our breakpoint. So now I'm going to create a variable, and of course it's going to be a number variable. And I'm going to call this breakpoints, breakpoints / screen sizes. Perfect. Cool. Now remember, these screen sizes are going to be literally numerical values. So we're going to use this to determine what the minimum, or should I say the maximum breakpoints are for it to kick into the next size. So the first value we're going to put, the first mode we're going to set is the desktop. Okay. Desktop. And now the screen width of that is, again, a lot of people have varying, theories on what you should use. Ideally, you should use for the most common screen size and all that good stuff. Yeah, you can. By all means, go for it. I personally like to use kind of a midpoint, so lots of data says the most popular screen size is 1920. I don't know if everyone's got 1920 screens. I don't know. I can't verify that information, but we trust the data, right? But because I'm designing on the MacBook Pro, and I like to ensure that I'm kind of inspecting things to effectively a Retina standard, because that's what I'm working with, I literally like to point it to 1440 pixels. That's the minimum width I'm working with on desktop. So therefore, you'll see when I'm working on future projects, because I've actually limited, or I've kind of given it a barrier of 1440. If I'm designing responsive correctly, when I resize my screen in terms of like expanding the width, everything should kind of like move accordingly and respond. Right? Does that make sense? I hope it does. So we're going to create another mode. I'm going to click the plus button up here, and that's going to be called tablet. And like I said, the tablet I have to preview this on has a width, in portrait mode at least, of 768 pixels. That's what I'm working with. You can make that anything you want according to whatever tablet you have. If you have the newest iPad, if you've got the oldest iPad, if you've got a Samsung tablet, if you've got an Android tablet, whatever, make it work for yours, because you're the one previewing it. And of course, because I'm working on an iPhone, my mobile breakpoint minimum size will be 375 pixels. Okay, so where will these variables come into good use? And now you notice I didn't put these sizes in our spicing prims, and that's only because I'm never going to use these figures except for to determine my screen sizes. So I'm not really going to plug them in, because they're not going to be used over and over again, right? These are literally just set figures that I'm going to set and leave them there. So how do these come to good use? Well, just like we apply the rest of our variables, and because we're working on desktop, I'm going to tap on that frame. Now, right now, if we go to our layout panel, we can see that the width is 1000 to 1000, basically 1920. I don't know why I'm trying to say the most here, but 1920, right? So if I want to really make sure that this is actually sitting on a tablet breakpoint, I'll literally update this size by clicking on the drop down arrow, apply variable. And you can see right here, I think it's working in alphabetical order. It's picking up that, these are one of the variables I've set. And the screen size is 1440. So I'm going to set that, right? So obviously, in terms of we're working responsive here, right? I haven't really set any of these variables here to fill the page. Yeah. But when you're designing, make sure you're setting things to fill the page so you can have that full responsive experience. So I'm just showing you effectively how that comes into good use. Okay. We're not going to use that for now, but we're going to use it for our tablet setting. Okay. So next thing I'll do is I'll duplicate this page. I'm going to hold down the Alt key or Option on Mac because I'm using the Mac. And I'm going to rename this frame to, I'm going to press Command and R to rename my layer. And you'll see it happening all up here. I'm going to call this tablet. And now that's tablet, I'm now going to update that size to, you guessed it, tablet. So right now it's using the desktop tablet. But what I can do here is go to the appearance and go to prims and breaks and literally activate that variable in. So I can now call that tablet and it will resize itself to literally a tablet setting. Okay. So this is what we got for our Typescale for tablet. Now, I guess I can do the work and, just click on the frame, press enter, and make everything kind of like fill the container, which is cool. But again, it just tells you ultimately that we kind of need to start setting these variables so we can actually preview these things properly. Okay. So this is how all the type is setting, but I'm going to now switch over to my iPad and I'm going to bring it up on the screen through some editing wizardry. And I'm going to show you how to effectively how we're going to use this and set up the type up for our tablet. Okay. Give me 1 second. Okay. So as you can see now, I'm on my Figma app and I'm going to activate the mirror feature. Okay. So tap on the sidebar. We're going to begin mirroring. So now if I go on my screen and I tap on the tablet frame, you will see update literally on my iPad as well. I'm going to tap that. And that's basically going to show you, yep, I get that. Cool. And this is now going to show me when it loads, because it's loading, how my typography sits on the page. Now you can see that the type it's pretty much out there. I mean, let's look at, for example, S2. We can see how that looks, right? We can see how our H1 looks. It's pretty big. And one can argue, do you know what? It's not too bad, but it doesn't work for me. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to fix the margins of this tablet. This will kind of determine what I may potentially use when I'm setting up my grid. So I'm going to set the horizontal padding to 80. And I might actually I'll leave the vertical padding as 108. Okay. Therefore, I can get a better image. In fact, I'm going to lower that to 64, I think. Yeah, I think that's better. 64. Okay. Now, we're looking at the way everything sits, and we're trying to make, as we had the desktop type fit the desktop, and that looks all really nice and harmonious. We're trying to capture the same thing for tablet. Okay. So we're going to open up our variables panel again. We're going to leave our prims and breaks and grids because now we've set that. We know we can set our page width with that. I'm now going to go to typography and I'm going to create a new mode. And when you create a new mode, it automatically duplicates all the figures for you. So if you remember in the last video, let me just name that to tablet. I said it's best to set up all the tablet ones first because when you set up the mode, it will literally duplicate all the values for you. So you don't have to literally type in all those figures again. This is the reason. So we're looking at the spec. We're going to leave spec the way it is for now because I'm not really looking at that right now. I'm going to jump straight into H1. And I'm thinking, compared to, let me just lower this down. Not lower this down, but kind of, just minimize it a little bit. Let me close that panel. So I'm looking at, in comparison to my desktop at 100%. Let me just turn off the outside interface for once, so why we talk about this. So we're on at 100%. This is the biggest the text is ever going to sit on the page. This is how it's going to be set. This is how the letter spacing is going to be set. This is how the line spacing is going to be set. And I'm happy with that. Okay. I'm trying to achieve the same thing, but for a tablet experience. So therefore, by using our eyes, it cannot be font size 80 on a tablet because that's just way too big and it's not harmonious. So we're going to affect that. Some people use different techniques for this. One technique I like to use, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, is I like to look at the next type style down and use that as the base for my next breakpoint. If that doesn't make sense, this is what I mean. So if we're looking at the font size from H1 on desktop is 80, H2 will be 56. So maybe, just maybe, we can make the font size on tablet 56. Okay. And because I'm on my tablet, I can see how that looks in live time. Oh, one more thing. I just realized it didn't update for you guys. We think what's going on. Let's turn the interface back on. So I'm going to press Command and period or full stop for us Brits. Let me turn these annotations off. Let's shift and Y. One thing we need to activate in our variables in our variable modes is we need to add typography. Now in this case, obviously we're working for mobile. So now anytime I affect something on the mobile tab, as you can just see, it's just literally like updates on my iPad. It will literally update in real time, okay, on the iPad and on my screen as well. So keep that into mind, that you need to be adding these variable modes as we go, and that will give you that flexibility to literally channel through responsiveness as you design your pages. Okay, so I toyed with the idea of maybe making my H2 on desktop my base on tablet. And I'm looking at it on the tablet right now, and I don't think it's too bad. I won't lie. I think it's fine. I think we need to adjust the line height, of course. And maybe just maybe, do we take the same, parameters that we have on H2 and just copy it to H1 tablet? Maybe. But right now, in terms of harmonious and what I'm looking at on my screen, I'm actually liking what I see. At 100% on desktop. Let me just turn the interface off. That's looking pretty fine. It's not too big, but at the same time, it's not too small. And on tablet, I think that works in terms of the way it fits and the width. I think that works. So that's one technique. So people can literally you can use the next style below to determine your sizes. And others just eyeball it. Some others have their own theory. Again, there is no one way of doing things when it comes to this design game. You can do things however you want as long as you reach and you strive for consistency, okay? Some people eyeball it. Some people like to be very pernickety with it. They will say, oh, if it was 80 on desktop, maybe it should be something like, 64 on tablet. And even though 64 doesn't look bad as well, right? So play with it. Use your eyes. I really encourage people to use their eyes. Don't rely on all these mathematical theories or theories from this designer or that designer. You got to really feel the design because it has to work for the experience that you are trying to create. I hope that makes sense. Yeah. So, for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to use the first method I showed you, where I'm just going to use the next style down as the basis for my breakpoint type scale. Okay. And obviously in some circumstances, it might not work. So then I'll just eyeball it just to let you know that there's flexibility in what we're creating. Okay. Don't overthink things like this. Okay. Don't overthink this unless someone has walked in and given you a guideline to say it must be like this, it must be like that. Then by all means, you're bound to whatever you're reading, but just use your eyes. At the end of the day, we're striving for consistency. So whatever you're designing on desktop is going to be consistent across the board. Whatever you're designing on tablet, whatever you set here in your variables, every layout in tablet will follow these parameters that you have set. That's the whole idea of striving for consistency. Cool. So let's play with the H2 parameters. It's going to be a little bit more of a tedious task as well. So I'm going to do a couple and then I'll just leave you to watch me do the rest, and then we'll come back again for mobile optimization. Okay, so now we're optimizing for tablet. Follow along with me and let's do this together. Yeah, cool. So 64 line height, I'm going to make 56. Yep, and I'm previewing on my tablet as I go, and I'm liking what I see. I am liking what I see. And as you can see, just to let you know, our component is working, is literally updating. So we said our font size would be 64. I'm gonna go back to the 56. I like the smaller font, and I like that a lot. There you go. So it's, it's updating itself. So we're working on that documentation as well. So whoever is using our system will always have up-to-date information regardless of what we do in the back end. Okay, so 56. Letter spacing is -1. I'm happy with that. My laptop's doing a little bit of a lag. I wonder what's happening. Anyways, paragraph spacing, again, we're not using paragraphs and things like this, so that's fine. So again, I'm previewing it on my tablet, and I'm liking what I see. I think that works. I actually think it really works as well. Let's look at that overline. Let's jump to overline real quick, because overline is sitting up here as well. I'm gonna scroll down to my overline text. Let me see if I can find it. Overline. So right now, font size on desktop is 12. On tablet, I'm just trying to think if it pairs well with the H1, if I'm going to use it like that. And I think I might toy with potentially making that a 10. I don't have a 10 in my spacing variable, so I'm going to add a 10. Let's quickly go to spacing and sizing. And I'm going to take that, shift enter, turn that to a 10. Literally a quick job. Anything we want, we can add. It's our system at the end of the day. Okay, and I'm going to change the H1 overline, sorry, the tablet overline, I beg your pardon. We're going to change that to a font size of 10. And looking on my tablet, I really like the size of that. And even on the screen, it looks good. You can imagine if, and sometimes I like to do this as well. I like to do some, just quick and dirty kind of just pairings. So, let me just quickly close this. This is how I just like to play with the type to see it kind of works in terms of just like optically, okay? You might see my iPad do something. Remember, I'm mirroring. So, sorry if it irritated you. Take the overline, take the H1, and I kind of pair them next to each other as I'll use them on the website. Yeah, I think that works. You think that works? I think it does. I think that's beautiful, actually. That works. Looking on my tablet, yeah, that works. Works a lot. Cool. So I'll delete that frame for now, and I'll go back to my tablet. So again, we're just looking at, what we see. Let me turn the interface on, get my variables tab open. Figma needs to work on a shortcut to open the variables panel. That'd be very useful if you're listening to Figma. Okay, my bad. Okay, cool. So I'm happy with that. So H1 is going to take on the attributes of H2. Now we're going to go to H2 on tablet. Scroll down ever so slightly. And we can see right now, the H2, because obviously we're duplicating all the elements from H1 onto our tablet. We're now seeing that's a different size. So in the method I'm doing, I'm going to take, you guessed it, the H3 attributes and make that my H2 attributes. So so the font size is 40. I'm going to update that font size to 40. And again, I'm previewing on my tablet. I'm previewing on the screen in front of me at 100%, 100% zoom. That gives you literally the actual real value and the real size of things. And I like that. So I'm going to take that attributes on. I'm going to carry it on. So font size is 40. Line height is also 40. Letter spacing is -1. And paragraph spacing is 0. Again, that looks good. I'm happy with that. Now, as I'm looking at this, and this is how it is sometimes, it's not so linear setting these things up, right? I'm now looking at my spec my spec sizes, and I'm thinking to myself, I think spec needs to be a different size for tablet, only because I'm looking at my tablet and I'm thinking, I like things to look, in one, basically in one piece. And there's a consideration in the sense of whoever's looking at this on desktop, for example, might it might not sync well with them if they're all different sizes. But I don't care. I'm gonna make it work anyway. So I'm gonna change my spec size to 14. I think 14 is gonna work. On tablet. Let's see. I already using the spec sizes. Oh, look at that. So we're met with a classic 22 error, right? I call it a classic 22. A classic 22 error is when you don't update your components with the variables, you find yourself in situations like this, where you're trying to update something and preview it, but you realize the component itself hasn't been updated with the actual type style with its variables. Classic, right? So I'm going to quickly quickly close this panel, jump back into my actual component. And I'm going to update all the type I've used here. And I've gone into outline mode because it's just easier for me to see on this dark background, right? I'm going to update them to spec. In fact, everything's using spec, right? So let me just tap on the actual component itself, component frame. I'm going to press enter to activate this layers. I'm going to press enter again, and that's going to go through to the actual text itself. Then I'm going to update the style to spec. Boom. Now all of those should now be spec, right? I also used an override. Now Figma have overrides. So back in the day, and as you may have seen in the beginning of the Typescale setting video that I was doing for desktop, you may have seen that I created a spec regular and a spec bold. That was a slight mistake. Again, that's just a habit I'm trying to get over because Figma provides overrides. Now, there may be some circumstances where you have certain fonts that you can't do the overrides on. I'm yet to find those, but if you do have them, just create yourself another type style that's bold, and then you'll be well on your way. Okay, back out of outline mode, return to instance, and now we can see a clear difference between the size of the spec on this page, on the desktop page, and of course on our tablet page as well. Okay, so I'm looking at it on tablet as well. I like the way it really harmonizes together. I think that works really well. And to be honest, whoops, that's not the right page. At 100%, it actually doesn't look bad. I think whoever's previewing this can actually still read that. That's still very much legible, that they can see, all that is there. And of course, the overrides haven't kicked in. This is where you might have to create, a bold. But I'm not really bothered in this case because of what I'm using to distinguish between the different pieces of information is the color. So the title is in blue, and the actual parameter is in gray. So there we have that. Okay, I digressed. All right, so now let's open up our variable panel. So we're happy with H1, we're happy with H2. Cool. Now let's look at H3. Again, I'm going to use H4's parameters to determine my H3 on tablet. Okay, so font size is 28. So I'm going to select H3 to be 28. And I notice as well, we've actually gone up a little font weight as well. And I guess that was again just to accommodate for the size of how that's going to be. Sorry, I forgot to flip my tablet here. But yeah, that's cool. I'm happy with that. I'm actually very happy with that. Literally, it's working for me perfectly well. So 28, of course, line height is going to be 28 as well. We're happy with the font weight at 600. Cool. And then Letter spacing is actually 0 in this case, which is fine. I'm happy with that. Because at that size, you kind of need a letter spacing to kind of play with you properly. I'm just looking at it on my screen. I'm thinking, I don't know. I think I like the -1, you know? Yeah, I think I like the -1. We're going to keep it at -1. So again, we're using our eyes as we go. So not everything's going to be to the book. Flexibility. So we're happy with our H3. H3 is cool. I'm happy with H3. Now we're going to go to, we've done spec. We're going to jump to H4. Now H4 is going to take on, you guessed it, H4. My tablet is going to take on, well, this is where we're now at another conjunction here. So do we keep H4 on tablet and H4 on desktop the same size? I think we could. And these are certain exceptions that we make, but I think we can do that. I'm happy with that as well. Because initially, if I had H5, I'll just make sure it takes on H5 parameters. It can't take on the S1 parameters because they have different font values altogether. So I think we'll leave it at that. If anything, maybe in design, and I'm looking at it in tablet, maybe I might see that maybe the H4 might be a little bit big. Then I might just come into my panel here and just tweak it, maybe make it 24 or whatever, and see how that works. But other than that, I'm actually happy to leave that the way it is. Okay, now we're going to go to S1. Now, S1 for me is a little bit chunky on tablet. I won't lie, it's a little bit chunky. So what we have right now is we have S1 and it's 24 on tablet, on desktop, and it's also 24 on tablet. Now I'm looking at my S2. My S2 on tablet is 20. So therefore, if I'm gonna knock it all down, I might make my S1 20, which I'm really feeling. I might knock down the line height as well to maybe a 28. Yeah, that looks perfectly fine. And then I might as well, that lead spacing is fine. Paragraph spacing, I'm happy with paragraph spacing. I think that's fair. And then my S2, I'm going to knock it down to an 18, but obviously I don't have an 18. So what do? That's right. We go into our prims, go into our spicing prims, and then I'll add an 18. Really simple. Like, what's anyone going to say? Nothing. Cool. All right. Let me go back to typography. And then my S2 font size will be 18. I'm looking at that. And they're very subtle differences, but they will have their uses. But other than that, I like that. I'm going to lower the line height as well, just optimally on my screen. I'm going to lower down that to a 24. We're seeing it here as well on the screen, and we're seeing it on my tablet as well. And I'm happy with that. The paragraph spacing, I think it's fair. I might knock it down to a 14. Yeah, just ever so subtle, but I think that sits really well. I think that reads well, and I think that works for what we're trying to do. Okay, body copy. Body copy on tablet is currently at 16, and on desktop it was also at 16 as well. I'm not mad at it. I think it works. I think it works really well for a tablet. You know, if you're reading something, I think it's a good font size. If anything, I might lower down the line height just to create a bit more cohesiveness on desktop. Sorry, on tablet. Sorry. And I might punch down the paragraph spacing by, let's see what the 14 looks like. No, maybe 12. No, I didn't type 14. 14. Do you know what? It's hard to see with 2 lines. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into the actual file itself. I'm just going to manipulate the size so I can get at least 3 lines on each. So I can see the difference between the balance. And I think that balance is really well. In fact, I actually might make it 12. So you can imagine reading a big block of body copy, which would be like the main thing, and it's sitting right on here on the desktop. Oh, sorry, on the tablet. I keep calling it desktop, but you guys know what I mean. Tablet, And yeah, I think that works really well, actually. I'm going to leave that the way it is. Body 2. Body 2 works well. I think for that size, it reads really well as well. Looking at that 100% on the screen, I think that worked well. Looking at that on the tablet, I think that works well. I think I might leave that the way it is, only because optically it's quite small as well. So I think I'm happy with that. I'm happy with body 2 being consistent on desktop and tablet as literally the same parameters. If anything, again, I might punch down the paragraph spacing. Or line height. Maybe line height. I might just nudge that down to a 20. Again, just tighten it up a little bit. And paragraph spacing, make that 10. Yeah, perfect. That works for me. And again, because we're working with such a small screen, we need to ensure we can be tight where we need to be and loose where we need to be. Okay, so caption. Okay, so captions are going to be captions. They're going to be relatively small anyway, right? So on desktop, captions fall at size 14. I think on tablet, it should probably be a little bit smaller at 12. Perfect. And I might just take in the line height ever so slightly to an 18. Perfect. And paragraph spacing, we're probably never going to use paragraphs for captions. And if we end up doing in the design phase, we'll just simply adding some paragraph spacing. This not a big deal. Okay, we're cool on that. Now we're looking at button labels. Now when we're looking at button labels, we're basically just looking at how the button text reads on the tablet. Now, I'm a big fan of balance. I don't like a chunky button, but at the same time, I don't like a button that's too tiny to read. I'm 36. My eyes still work relatively well, despite I wear glasses. But I'm thinking of a wider audience. Super people in the elderly ages might want things really big, and I think that just makes the design a bit ugly. So some cases where big design works. And I just think everyone will be irritated if that button size is way too small. However, I'm looking at that, and I think that actually works well. Let me actually hug that to see as a button example that works. We're going to set up buttons later. We'll optimize this again. But as a button, looking at my desktop, I think that works well. Looking at my tablet, most importantly, I think that button works well. If you hover your thumb over that button, you can tap it and you can read that's a button. Yeah? Cool. So I'm happy with that. I'm not touching that. I'm going to go to buttons labels for my nav bar. Now, again, nav bar behaves differently. So on desktop, the nav bar will kind of effectively most likely sit at the top of the page, top of the screen, and you have it there. You can see it. And right now it's sitting at a font size of 16, which I think is fair. On tablet, we'll probably be hiding behind a hamburger menu. So again, I'm looking at that size of label and I'm thinking, could that work well for a tablet? I think it's big enough. I definitely think it could be read. I'm happy to put a pin in it. And when I'm designing the actual navigation bar and designing the hamburger menus, I'm happy to come back and actually preview that and see if that works for the design style I'm going to go for. I might make it a bit bigger, but definitely will not get smaller. But I think that works for what it is. Now, tag label. Now, let me hug that. Now, for tags. So tags, when you're using things for like filters and, you're doing like extra small buttons, I'm trying to think, will this work on a tablet? Now, on desktop, that currently sits at a font size of 12. It may feel like it's small to you, but remember, that's also in capitals. So that's also in a cap setting. So the K size is capitals, which means that it's naturally going to fit a little bit bigger to the eye. Okay. So that's in a way, it's kind of like an optical illusion. If you want to use bigger font, but don't want to use bigger font, put it in caps. Make sure it looks nice, give it some style. But I'm just thinking ahead in terms of creating like filters for like, drop downs and search functions and things like that. And I think on tablet, it looks a bit too big. It is too prominent. It's not necessarily a primary feature. So I'm going to turn that down to about 10. And I think that's fair. I'm looking at it on my tablet. my iPad, and I think that's perfectly fine. And that works. I'm not going to change anything else. That's perfectly fine. We just tweaked overline. Overline is already at a 10, and that looks perfectly fine. Remember, I did my quick and dirty example. And now we're going to look at our inputs. Now, I like to look at inputs from at least 3 different angles. The label, 3 components, or 3 elements. The label, the input text itself, and helper text, okay? Now, labels, for one, we're seeing a little example right here at the bottom, and put on the big screen as well, as you can see. So this is effectively a, let me manipulate the size here for you so you can see. Okay, so we're looking at this as like a multi-line field, but effectively it's a text field anyway. So I'm looking at the label itself. So this is going to be, where if you're creating a form, for example, and you have your name, email address, password, all that. This is where we're going to see if these things read properly. Now, I'm looking at this on my tablet, and I think that's pretty fair. Because right now, the label on a desktop setting, font size 14, I think that's very well optimized, especially for Plus Jakarta Sans, which is a relatively beautifully optimized font, and I think that works really well. So I'm going to leave that at 14 on my label. I'm happy with that. I might even include a sub-label when we're creating those input components later on. But again, I wouldn't make it any bigger or smaller than the input label itself. So I think I'll just use color to distinguish the different functions. But I'm happy with that. The input text itself. Now we have 16. And I remember this was on desktop is to basically mirror the body copy as well. Now let me just quickly go and see what I use for body. So the principle I'm going to say is wherever is used for the primary body, i.e. body 1 text style, I'm going to use also for the input labels text fields as well. So 16, yeah. So I'm going to stick with 16 as well on the label, only because when you're filling out a form on the desktop, on the tablet, you want it to be clear enough for you to see, right? If anything, I will mirror the line spacing parameters that we have on body 1. So that's 16 and 24. And I'm going to mirror that here as well. Field text 16, 24, perfect. It's fine. It works well for me. And then the helper. Again, if there's an error, for example, you need to know what the error is. It will literally appear in like a little container like this to say, this is what the matter is, fix it or don't fix it, whatever you want to do. That is currently set at 14. And I'm looking at that and I'm thinking to myself, even on desktop, is that clear enough to really communicate the message that something is wrong with this field? I think it works well on desktop. Does it work on the tablet, however? I think is a tad bit chunky, and considering it's using color to emphasize the message, I might knock it down. So I'll make that 12, and then I'll bring in the line height to about 16. Yeah, perfect. So again, we're using proximity and size here to ensure that we can actually communicate this thing very, very effectively. And there you go. We've now optimized our desktop Typescale for tablet. Okay, that didn't take really long. That didn't take long at all. And again, looking at our components, we need to update the actual components that we're using. So this is a 64, so I'm assuming that's going to use what? Oh, there is no 64. Okay, cool. In that case, let me just manually tweak that line height. And because we're not using this in our design, we could just do things on the fly like this. It's cool. Perfect. All right. Turn off the interface. Now we've got our desktop set. We've also got our tablet set. It's perfect. Now in the next video, we're going to do the same for mobile. And that won't take long because you remember what we did to get the tablet and parameters. We're going to do the same method to get the mobile. If you want, you can even go ahead and do it yourself and just meet me in the video after that. But meet me in the next video. Be right back.